You might have seen this before. This is just a picture of what's called a parampara. Parampara is made of two words, param and para. They sound the same because they mean the same. It just means one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, like that. So if you, I wanted to sort of zoom out from Prabhupada and put Prabhupada in history, just so we know where we are in history. If you look at the chart, you'll see, of course, at the top you'll see Lord Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then you'll see Krishna's playing his flute. And can you see that the flute sound of Krishna is going into the ear of Lord Brahma? And although the sound of the flute is a beautiful, pure, clean sound, when it enters the ear of Brahma, he hears it and it comes out of his mouth not as the sound of a flute, but as the sound of Vedic mantra. So that's Brahma. And he has a disciple, you see him sitting on the lotus there. He was all alone in the universe. And he created the universe through sound. So he speaks to his disciple, Narada Muni, who doesn't play the flute. Narada Muni doesn't play the flute, he plays the veena. It's a stringed instrument. And he plays the veena very well. And the sound of his veena takes him around the universe. And Narada Muni has a disciple. And the name of the disciple is? Who knows? Who knows the name of the disciple? Yes? Oh, it's there. It's written there, is it? Okay. Bit of a giveaway. It's just really to keep you awake. That's all. Thanks, Gopal. So then Vyasadeva has another disciple, Madhva. And Madhva, of course, is before Lord Chaitanya. You see the picture there? And Chaitanya had 6 followers known as the 6 Goswamis. And from the Goswamis it goes down to someone called Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he was in the Victorian times in India. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is where the Prabhupada story really begins, actually, because he was the father of Prabhupada's guru. If it wasn't for Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his, how many children? 11, 12 children. Then Srila Prabhupada, who started the Hare Krishna movement, wouldn't have had that guru, because one of his sons became the guru, the spiritual teacher of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this was just a little bit of a visual meditation for you, but can you see the picture of Bhaktivinoda Thakur? In 1896, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a book, and it was called Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. And he sent that book in English to different universities. He sent one to London, one to Canada, different parts of the world. And he longed for the day when someone would be able to take the teachings of Chaitanya in English and take it all over the world. And in 1896, the very year when he started reaching out to people in the English language, Prabhupada was born in Calcutta. And the reason why Prabhupada is extremely important for us, well, because if there was no Prabhupada, we wouldn't be sitting here, he'd be sitting somewhere else. And Prabhupada really, when you think of Hare Krishna movement, it's Prabhupada who's really set that all off. But Prabhupada wasn't always Prabhupada. He wasn't always Prabhupada, whatever they tell you. He was young. He was your age. And he used to play football. What position did Prabhupada play? Goalkeeper. And they said to him, Prabhupada, when you were at school, did you play any other sports? He said, yes. Prabhupada, what sport was it? He said, I was the head of the debating society. So, Prabhupada at the time he was very much against the British. The British had been in India for 200 years, and a lot of people wanted to say goodbye to the British, including Prabhupada. At one time they were cleaning the Calcutta Victoria Memorial Building, which is as high as St. Paul's Cathedral, and there was bamboo scaffolding all over it. So Prabhupada was very much a leader of the youth. So he climbed all the way to the top, and he took the Union Jack off, and he put the flag of India's independence, which at that time was a flag that was just, you know, saffron. So he's a bit of a revolutionary. He used to go to meetings to not talk about Krishna, but to talk about the teachings of Gandhi, who was a bit of a revolutionary at the time. If you've seen the movie Gandhi, you'll know what that was all about. So Prabhupada went to those meetings, and the meetings used to get broken up by the police who used to come along. And in 1922, when Prabhupada was a Gandhian follower, his friend said to him, he said, there's a meeting going on tonight. Some people are meeting a sadhu, a holy man called Bhaktisiddhanta. And Prabhupada at the time, he said, I don't want to go. I've got something else on. So he said, his friend, it was Narendranath Malik, was his friend. He said, no, come, you'll like it. And Prabhupada said, no, I don't want to go. I've seen enough holy people. So then he said, no, I said, come. And he pulled him by the elbow. And later on in life, Prabhupada remembered that incident in 1922, and he said, he pulled me. He pulled me to go. I didn't want to go, but he pulled me. So I'd heard about this place where Prabhupada met his guru for 40 years. And I'd never been there. And just this year, in February, there was a nice devotee in Calcutta, in the temple there, and he took me to see this place. And it's a 3-story brown brick building in a suburb of Calcutta. It's a very short street near a train station. And on the top of that building, that's where Prabhupada met with his guru. You can fold these up now, you may not need them. They were just to sort of capture your interest in the beginning. I'll get them back at the end. Thanks. These are about 20 years old, actually. Very old ones. So he met him there, and the first thing he said to him was, he says, with his friend, he said, you're nice young men. He said, why don't you take the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English language and take it all over the world? And he hadn't even met them. He just said, why don't you do that? And I said, me? You know, he hadn't even met this person before. I think he knew who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, but he didn't quite go to the meeting expecting that, you know. Actually, Prabhupada did know who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was because he used to take part in plays, and he'd always get the part of Advaita Acharya with a long white beard. So he was given this order, but it wasn't until 1944, that's 22 years later, that he thought, I should, well, actually it was 11 years later when he got initiated. He took vows. And then another 11 years after that when he started a magazine called Back to Godhead. Back to Godhead. It was just a newspaper, and according to what was going on in the day, he would take these political stories and he would put some sort of philosophical commentary to them. And then he would go coffee house to tea house to different groups of people, and he would sell these for just a few coins each one. Sometimes he just used to give them out. They were newsprints, so he used to print thousands at a time. But it was his effort, and it was in the English language. See, India had been dominated so much by English people and the English language and no one had ever really done this before, to put the teachings of Krishna into English. So this was going to be Prabhupada's very special contribution. And English was a language that was spoken all over the world, especially because in the Victorian days, if you looked at a map of the world, under the British government was Australia, Canada, West Indies, India, and what's now Pakistan. Where else? Bit of Borneo. Then, where's all the fighting going on right now? Gaza and Israel. Okay, that was under the British. Jordan under the British. Egypt under the British. In fact, the British, they'd got there before anybody else and stuck their flag everywhere. And then they did the administration. It's a bit like today when you go to America. You go around all the IT suites. Everybody there is a Mr. Taravalingam, Subramanyam. Everybody in South India, I think, has learned how to, do software programming and has gone to America, because you'll see so many people there. And so when you've got a particular talent, you can take that all over the world. So the British, apparently, they had a talent for administration and bureaucracy and diplomacy. So they took that all over the world. But not everybody was happy with that. So beginning in the 1800s, people started telling them to go home. So India, they finally went home in 1947. Israel, they went home in 1948. Australia, they went home a little bit. When was that? A little bit around that time. Egypt, 1950. So, but English was known all over the world. It was spoken all over the world. So if you could get the teachings of Krishna into the English language, then people in America could understand it, and people in Australia, and people in many different parts of the world. So this is what Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to do. He wanted Prabhupada, his disciple, to take it all over the world, because that was what Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his father, wanted him to do. And why is it so important? Because the teachings of Krishna are, at very least, another option for people to study and explore. When I was very young, when I was 17, I came to Bhaktivedanta Manor, and when I told my mum that I was now, because I had hair down here, you see, I had long hair down here. Okay, let that image sink in. Long ginger hair. No, it's not an image you want to keep for a long time. Anyway, I shaved my head, and I wrote back to my mum. I said, "Mum, I've shaved all my hair off, not my head, my hair, and I've got into the Hare Krishna movement." She said, "Well, I can understand you getting into something more spiritual, but why didn't you get into something, English?" I said, "What do you mean, like what?" She said, "Well, Christianity." I said, "Mum," "Christianity's not English." She said, "Yes, it is. Church of England." I said, "Mum, I think you'll find it Well, I didn't say that. That would have been a bit too cheeky. I said, "Mum, Christianity's from the Middle East. East of London. East of England." Yeah. And so she said, "Oh, you know what I mean." So, if you're born in India, you believe in Krishna. If you're born in Arabia, you believe in Allah. If you're born in England, you believe in Jesus. If you're born in North America, in one of the tribes, you believe in someone called Manitou. Manitou was the god of the North American Indians. So wherever you were in the world, you'd believe in your own god. But really, that god is just the same god by another name, because there can't be more than one. Can't be more than one ultimate, highest, supreme. Supreme means there's only one of them. If you have two supremes, they're going to fight, aren't they? Only Diana Ross had three supremes and they didn't fight. Well, sometimes they did. But there's only one Supreme, only one origin of everything, but many different names. Just like the sun comes up in the Eastern world, but it's not an Eastern sun. And when it goes down in the West, it's not a Western sun, just one sun, but many different names. If you're in India, you say Suraj. You wiggle your head like that. If you're in France, you say, oh, du soleil. And all around the world, they have a different name, but there's only one sun for everybody. So, why shouldn't people who are born in England, who speak English, understand a bit about Krishna? Do you know how many, I go to schools and I go to different places sometimes, and they've invited someone to come and speak about Hinduism. And I stand up there, an English guy, and I look around at the class and I said, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Come on, say it. Say it. You thought I was going to be... And they all smile and they go like this. You thought I was going to be brown, didn't you? And they go, oh, no, we'd never say that. No, but you'd think it, wouldn't you? You'd think it. I said, because when you say the word Hindu, you think of a brown person. I said, well, let me tell you something. When you think of the word Christian, do you think of a white person? And they go, that's interesting. I said, do you know how many countries Christ is worshipped in? Huh? How many? 196 different countries. You will find Christians of all different colours and all different ethnicities, all different backgrounds. So I said, in India, do you know how many Indians worship Christ and go to church every Sunday? I didn't know. I said 56 million. In India there are 56 million Christians and they all go to church. So I said, my dear friends, is it alright if one Englishman worships Krishna? And they go, yeah, that's all right. We don't mind. So then, this is what Prabhupada wanted, because what Bhaktivinoda Thakur wanted, he said, when will that day come? When the Russians, the Americans, and the British, they will come to Mayapur, and they will sing with hands raised in the air, Jai Sachinandan. He said, when will that day come? So Prabhupada, he wanted to fulfill the orders of his gurus and take the understanding of Krishna and Bhagavad Gita to the West in the English language. Now someone had already tried to do that. That was another of Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples. But they came to London, and they came in 1932, 33, 34, and they met a lot of rich and famous people. They even met the king and the queen, and then they went home. They didn't come to Harrow. That was their mistake. Actually, of course, in those days, even if they'd come to Harrow, it was filled with white people. They would have. But they went and saw the rich and famous people, and they spoke as if they were cultural ambassadors. But Prabhupada didn't have that idea. He didn't have that idea. And in fact, actually, if Prabhupada had gone to America in the 1920s, do you think Krishna consciousness really would have gone over well in the 1920s? You know, prohibition, gangsters, flapper girls, Charleston. I don't think it would have happened. In the 1930s, if Prabhupada had come in the 1930s to America, to England, not really. You know, who's this elderly Indian man from one of our colonies? What do we have to learn from our colonies? They have a lot to learn from us. Because the British idea was that we are taking civilization out to India, because they don't have any. We are taking their gold, because we don't have any. And we are giving them education. Just see, it was all very much one-sided. So if Prabhupada had come to England or America during the war in the 1940s, everybody's minds were filled with, you know, a lot of big problems. You just had Pearl Harbor, and then the Americans were getting involved in the invasion of Europe with D-Day. You know, a other young kids, 17, 18, 19, we were being pulled into the army and the Air Force. Prabhupada's message would have been a little difficult. So Prabhupada actually came in the 1960s, in 1965. And it seems, actually, that Prabhupada was the right person chosen by Krishna at the right time in history. And when he got there, he met the right type of people. He didn't go for people his own age. How old was Prabhupada when he came on the ship to America? Do you remember?
70?
Yeah. He was actually 69 when he got on board the ship, and he celebrated his 70th birthday on the way. They celebrated Janmashtami on board the ship. So he had a little bit of money, no friends, only 2 people that met him when he came on the other side. So he didn't know anybody, but he had big plans. He had very big plans. And he met young people, your age and maybe 1 or 2 years, a little bit more. So he sat under a tree, and he had his cartels with him, and he chanted the Hare Krishna mantra. Now, if you saw someone in a park doing that, well, now you would, but previously, if you saw someone who was 70 years old, sitting under a tree, singing to himself, with no one else there, playing cartels, you would have thought, I'll just walk on by. I'll give him a bit of space. Because whatever he's doing, I don't know what it is. Sounds okay, he seems peaceful, he seems as if he's not going to bite anybody, I'll walk on by. However, when you are a pure devotee of Krishna and you sing to Krishna, Krishna is in the heart of others. And Krishna makes Krishna within the heart say to that individual, go and see what that person's doing. See what he's doing. It's a very strange thing, go check it out. So that's what happened. People came and they sat. Prabhupada asked them to chant. They didn't know what it was, but they came. Then more came, and more came. And then he started teaching them. And Prabhupada wasn't satisfied to just bring a few things. Prabhupada, if he just brought prasadam and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, would have been very, very popular. He would have had thousands upon thousands of followers. Just imagine. Eat this gulab, eat this samosa, chant this mantra. Well, he did say that, but he said a whole lot more, because he wanted to give everything that his guru had given him. And that's the essence of this parampara, this chain of enlightened human beings who give this very special message to others. So Prabhupada didn't hold back on anything, he gave everything, every last drop of thing that he had been given himself. So who can name some of the things that Prabhupada gave? Who can name some of the things? I'll start you off. He gave books. He translated the books from Sanskrit, and then sometimes from Bengali, which is over in the east of India. Sanskrit is the ancient language of the rishis, the language of the Vedas. The sound that comes out of Krishna's flute is like a little USB. And then when you plug it into Lord Brahma, it comes out manifested as the Vedas. High density information, which is then expanded. So Bengali is the local language of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada translated very important books. In the 1760s, there was a chap called John Wilkins who translated the Bhagavad Gita for the first time from Sanskrit into English, but they couldn't understand it. They knew it was a very important book because everybody said, that's our most important book. They said, all right, it's only 700 verses, let's do that one first. But they kept getting things wrong. Just like in very, very old English versions of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is addressing Krishna as Hrishikesh. Hrishikesha. In Sanskrit, you can put two words together to form a third word. So, Hrishik means the senses, and Esha means the controller of the senses. But they didn't know that, so they divided it another way. And they divided it Hrishi and Kesha. So Kesha means hair, or hairy, and Hrishi means brittle, yeah. So Arjuna, instead of saying to Krishna, my dear controller of the senses, he's saying, my dear brittle-haired one, which doesn't mean anything at all. And later on, of course, he says to him, my dear Gudakesha. So, Gudakesha. Guda, of course, means sleep. And Esha means my dear controller of sleep. But then if you split it another way, it comes to Guda Kesha. So Kesha means hair, and Guda means buttocks. My dear buttock hair. So this is how the British thought that Arjuna was speaking to Krishna. So they got it wrong. So no one can understand Sanskrit. You can translate it, but you can't understand it unless you know the concepts behind it. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knew the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam, whereas the Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses, the Srimad Bhagavatam is 18,000. It's one of the Puranas. It tells the story of the incarnation of Krishna. That's a third of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then in the other 2/3, there's all the other different incarnations and different sages. So no one had translated that. So Prabhupada, he had translated that for 8 years, and he brought that with him. What a great contribution. If you haven't read it, I suggest that you do read it, because it's a beautiful piece of poetry and a beautiful piece of work. So then Prabhupada said, why are you killing animals? Why are you killing animals? Animals are not meant for food. He said, why do you worship your dog but kill other animals for food? He said, why don't you look at everybody equally? And he pointed to a verse in Bhagavad Gita that said, an enlightened person looks at an animal, a small animal, big animal, a tree, a man, all as being equal. He said, why are you eating some and petting others? He said, why don't you just treat them all equally? He said, either you eat all animals, either eat your dog, eat your cat, okay, eat everything, or respect everything. He said, and better to respect everything. So then, when you're dealing with people who like to eat meat, but you want them to change their diet, then you've got to give them something better. You've got to give them something better. Prabhupada said, if a baby has picked up a broken piece of glass and she's holding it in her hand, and you want the baby to give you the broken piece of glass, he said, you can't say, give it, because the baby will just go squish and hurt herself even more. So what you have to do is you have to take a sweet, say, give me that, I'll give you a sweet. And she will drop that, because it's better. So he had to come out with food that was better. Had to come out with food that was better. So that's why our religion is called the kitchen religion, because food plays such a big part in it. You see? At the beginning tonight, the first thing that happened is prasadam. And tonight, after kirtan, the last thing you get before you go home is dessert. Prasadam. Cheesecake, I hear. As everybody knows, cheesecake was invented in India 5,000 years ago. Did you know that? So prasadam, very, very important, because if you have only known food that has been blessed by Krishna, you won't be attracted to, you know, chicken McNuggets and Mr. KFC. You won't be attracted to these things. Yes, indeed.
You don't want to listen to that.
Not going to listen to it, no. Good, Gopal. Thank you.
You don't want to listen to that because the kingdom
So, Prabhupada also gave farms, he gave festivals, beautiful festivals like Rath Yatra, Janmashtami. He said everybody loves to sing, everybody loves to dance. You going, gentlemen? Everybody loves to sing. I thought it was what I said. Everybody loves to sing, everybody loves to dance. He said they can do that for Krishna. He gave theatre, music, and what else? I suppose, you know, if you go to... Who's been to Vrindavan? Been to Vrindavan? Yeah. When you go to Vrindavan, it seems that everybody in the bazaar has a picture of Srila Prabhupada. Everybody claims to have known Prabhupada. Prabhupada, he was a great friend of my father. Come, buy my things. Every rickshaw wala, I know Swamiji, I know you. The guy's 22. 22-year-old rickshaw driver says, I knew him before he went to America. No, he went to America in 1966. I knew him. He used to come to my house. Everybody knows him. Why? Because Prabhupada made Vrindavan famous. He made Vrindavan famous all over the world. Now Vrindavan is so famous, a little bit too famous, that many people from Delhi want to come and build a house there. So Vrindavan used to be filled with trees, now Vrindavan is filled with concrete buildings. So unfortunately you have to go out a little bit to see the Vrindavan that you would have heard about in the books about Krishna. Chanted the Hare Krishna mantra in Kirtan on the 25th of August 1974. What a day. It was in a rainy pop festival field, covered in mud, but the devotees were there singing, and they gave me halava and roasted peanuts and said, sit down, eat it, here's an orange, wash your hands, sing this song, play this tambourine. And I did exactly as I was told, and it was wonderful. My first kirtan. And I'm coming up to 40 years of kirtan. And I think that when Prabhupada gave the Mahamantra, he was not sure who would take to it. He told people afterwards, he told his disciples afterwards, he said, every couple of weeks I used to go to the shipping office and I used to find out the price of tickets and I used to find out when the next ship was leaving. He said, because I had come and I had a return ticket and I just want to know if I could still go home. He said, if no one took to Krishna consciousness, I could still get back to India. But luckily for us, people took him seriously. It shouldn't make sense. Krishna consciousness should not make sense. Hare, Krishna and Rama. Just 3 words. And if you repeat them, they make you happy. That is not scientific. It should not work. If you take any other 3 words, okay, Gatwick, airport, and toasty, put them together. Gatwick airport, Gatwick airport, 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 Gatwick, Gatwick. Airport toasty, toasty airport. And you try doing that for 40 years and see what happens. Well, you'll be locked up. Either that or you'll be in Gatwick airport eating a toasty. But the point is, it shouldn't work, just 3 words over and over again. It shouldn't actually work, but it does. And that's because those 3 words are different. There's a different quality to them. Because those 3 words are divine words. They're spiritual words. And proof of that is that it's not just something for people in India. It's not just something for some young Americans in the 1960s. Hey man, far out, peace, love, good vibes. Because if it was just something for the 60s, it would have stopped in the 70s, right? If it was just something for the 60s and 70s, it would all be over by the 80s. And if it was just for the last century, come 2000 and January the 1st, it would have been over. It would have been finished. If it was just something for India, okay, then no other people would have been involved. But now, did you know that last week, the devotees of Krishna in Moscow just celebrated their 100th group in the city. It's like this is a group. There are 7,000 devotees in just that one city of Moscow. Hare Krishna is the 4th biggest religion in Russia. And we have people out in Siberia, and these devotees, if they throw a cup of water up in the air, okay, during the Christmas marathon, it turns into ice when it's up here, and then falls down as ice. It's that cold, 40 degrees below. And they still do kirtan. They're either mad or they really love it. And they're not mad, and they do really love it. So there's thousands of people. Also in China. China! How can Chinese people say Hare Krishna? You know what they say? They say, Hale Kese Na. Kese Na. But actually, there are 1,000 devotees. 1,000 devotees. And they have just finished, just 4 months ago, they just finished putting the Srimad Bhagavatam into Chinese. Srimad Bhagavatam in Chinese. Makes a very, very big set of books. Very big set of books. Chinese takes up an awful lot of paper. It's a good job they invented paper, isn't it? So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chinese people, where else? Iceland. We just opened a preaching center in Reykjavik, in Iceland. Iceland. No? Try wearing a dhoti in Iceland. People don't wear dhotis everywhere. They wear their local clothing, speak in their local language. Prabhupada's books are now available in 98 different languages. 98 different languages. That's the amazing thing. Even in unusual languages like Amharic, Ethiopia, and Azerbaijani, and Serbo-Croat, and Cambodian. Prabhupada's messages getting to all these places. So it's a very exciting time to be alive, actually, because if you are very adventurous, you could take Prabhupada's message to a country where no one has ever done it before. How about that? Anybody want to do that? You're a nice young man. Why don't you take this message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to, think of a country. We have devotees even in places that you wouldn't even imagine that we could teach Krishna consciousness. I can't even give you the names of the countries because someone's filming. But if you ask me, I can tell you afterwards. So in countries even where Krishna consciousness is against the law, and teaching Krishna consciousness could get you lashes with a whip in a public marketplace, still we have devotees there and teaching. and putting books in the local language. It's quite an amazing feat of dedication. There's a young lady who's doing the rounds now. You've seen her on television, Malala, who was shot in the head for daring to be a girl who wanted to go to school and have an education. And the Taliban came and shot her in the head. She survived.
He's saying shot her in the head.
But she's going to different places and campaigning for education. Education is extremely powerful. Education changes you. It changes you. Education is so important that it makes you a completely different person. And spiritual education is the greatest form of education. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says it is the Raja Vidya, the king of all knowledge. So very, very transforming effect Prabhupada's teachings have on people who take it seriously. And I think that, when you come together in your groups like this and you learn something about Krishna consciousness, that will stay with you for life. It's a wonderful thing. Very, very wonderful thing, because it is a life-transforming contribution. So can I just say that these are some of the contributions that Srila Prabhupada gave to the world. Prabhupada is still giving them through his words and through his personal example. And we can understand him more by reading what he wrote, by listening to his voice. And these days, of course, you can watch videos with subtitles and you can study Prabhupada's teachings in so many different ways, learning about him. And the next thing we do after we've learned about him is, perhaps having been inspired, we can take that and we can share it with others. We say so many things to so many people. If you just tell one more person about Krishna consciousness and you do it with conviction, you will double the number of devotees of Krishna. If you tell 2 people, you will triple the numbers of devotees of Krishna. That's how it was done in Russia. They had no temple, hardly any books. What they were doing, they had one book and they had biros. And they would sit in a room and one devotee would read the book and people would get an exercise book like this, and that's how they would write, that's how they would publish Prabhupada's books, just in biro. And then they'd distribute those books in biro by passing them around their friends. And many, many people got to read Prabhupada's books just written by hand, in their own handwriting, in biro, in a school exercise book. Try it. It's a very interesting thing. We're a little bit spoiled here, of course, because we have, what do we have? We have one of the biggest temples in the world, biggest Janmashtami, big, Soho Street, restaurants, lots of people. And in one way, you may think, what can I do? My contribution is not very important. There's hundreds of devotees doing thousands of things. Well, let me tell you that what is most important is your personal relationship with Krishna, your personal relationship with Prabhupada, and your personal service for them, your personal contribution to the spreading of Krishna consciousness in the world. You're here because somebody told you. Somebody else will be here because you told them. And that's how a revolution starts and how it's continued. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for listening. Let's put money where our mouth is and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Any questions? I didn't think so, because you want your cheesecake. Should we do some kirtan?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how long I'll be able to go on.
No problem. Just as long as you
Okay.
as long as you want to.
Thank you very much, everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you.